My name is Dr. Annie Andrews. I'm running for the United States Senate to replace Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham has been a senator for half my lifetime. And as it turns out, most senators don't get better with age.
They hate my guts.
Will winning this race be easy? No. But you can't win if you don't run. And the one thing we can all agree on is Lindsey Graham doesn't deserve a free pass back to D.C. Now, Lindsey is going to tell you I'm radical, that I'm crazy, because that's what weak men do when they feel threatened by strong women. But here's the thing. I'm literally a busy mom and a pediatrician who plays peekaboo with my patients, watches Bluey with my kids, I love Bluey, and spends most of my free time shuttling them to dance, taekwondo, and football. Say hi, kids.
Hi, kids.
So radical. I also just happen to be someone who isn't afraid of a fight. A fight where we put common sense over culture wars and hope over hate. Right now, Lindsey Graham is counting on all of us to stay quiet. And that means one thing. It's time to get loud. I'm Dr. Annie Andrews, and I hope you'll join me.
Welcome to our table, Annie. It is so good to see you. Folks, I'm here with Dr. Annie Andrews, who is a pediatrician in Charleston, South Carolina, but she is a recently declared candidate for the United States Senate, and she's running against somebody who I know fairly well. If there is any Lindsey Graham expert in the world, this guy. Folks, if you don't know, I have endorsed Dr. Annie Andrews for the United States Senate because I think she's the real deal. And I think she will finally send Lindsey Graham home. So again, welcome to our table.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm even more excited to also become an expert in all things Lindsey Graham.
The flip-flopper himself.
That's right.
As I often said, Lindsey Graham has more flip-flops than Myrtle Beach. He is a piece of work.
That's right. That's right.
So why did you, folks know I ran against Lindsey in 2020. It was a historic race for a lot of reasons. There was COVID. We raised a lot of money, historic race. But in the end, we did not win. And I got a lot of reasons for why we probably didn't. But given that you saw all of that, and you also ran for Congress just a few years ago against Nancy Mace, bless her heart. She's a piece of work. So given that you've run against Nancy Mace and now you want to take on Lindsey Graham, why?
Well, first I'll say I watched you run against Lindsey. I was not incredibly politically active at the time, but I followed your campaign. Pretty sure I text banked for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I met you at a fundraiser, and I was incredibly inspired by this, statewide movement that gave so many of us so much hope at a time when we really needed it. And, I believe so deeply in your ability to win that year. And there's a lot of reasons I think we'll get into about why that ended up being such a difficult election cycle. But it's important. There's so many important reasons to run. And it doesn't all boil down to winning on election night. Obviously, that's the goal. That's why I'm in this race. But there's so many other reasons to run. Folks in South Carolina deserve to have something to feel hopeful about. They need to feel hopeful about the future. And I'm running for all of those reasons. I don't have to tell you all the reasons why Lindsey Graham doesn't deserve yet another 6-year term in the U.S. Senate. He's had 22 years to make people's lives better here in South Carolina, and he has failed by every measure.
Every measure.
And I can't wait to hold him accountable.
And this is a guy who, when he first ran for Congress, I think he was part of that Newt Gingrich Republican Revolution, had this term limit pledge, right? He said that you should only go to Washington for a certain number of times. I'm looking at my watch. He's been there for a while now.
Yes, he has. And, some folks serve in Washington for a long time and they remain pillars of their community. They come back and they talk to their constituents. They do the job they were elected to do. And I can't think of anybody who's failed more than Lindsey Graham. He has totally lost touch with the folks in South Carolina. He has said so much boldly into a microphone. He doesn't need to have a town hall. He's just in
Hasn't
DC.
had one since 2017, I believe.
It's just wild. It's wild. And, he's been in the Senate for 22 years, which is half of my lifetime.
Wow.
And it's a long long time.
Wow. Well, and I think you are bringing a perspective that is so important as well, and it's a perspective that we don't have in the United States Senate currently in South Carolina in terms of our representation.
Mhm.
It is someone who has children, who's a parent,
Yep.
right?
right.
And we have 2 U.S. senators that don't have kids. And right now, and not only do you have kids, but you play a very special role. You have a job that, there's certain jobs that I believe in our society that are really, really unique, that are really special. And one of those jobs, I think teacher is one of them.
Mhm.
The other is pediatrician. Let me tell you, I absolutely adore our pediatrician.
So do I.
Yes, Dr. Deborah Greenhouse. Shout out to you, Dr. Greenhouse, because she is the real deal.
That's right.
And I don't know if there's, outside of my wife and our kids' grandparents, I don't know if there's somebody who cares more about our kids than Dr. Greenhouse. And I know you feel that same way about the kids that you see as a pediatrician. Tell us talk about what that brings to someone and to have that perspective in the United States Senate, particularly right now.
That's right. I think both as a mom and a pediatrician, I do bring a really unique perspective. I can't think of a job other than public school teacher that is more community connected than being a pediatrician. And as you know, I've worked at the Children's Hospital in the Low Country for over 15 years. And I feel incredibly connected to the community because of that. When you work at a children's hospital, you treat every child who walks in the doors, no matter what corner of the state they come from, no matter their insurance status, no matter their background, you treat them all with the same level of care. And it's been an incredibly fulfilling career. But at the same time, when you go to work every day at a children's hospital, you see things that most people don't see.
Yeah.
You see kids every day who don't know where their next meal is coming from. You see kids whose parents can't afford their prescription drugs. You see children in the throes of a mental health crisis, but can't find mental health resources in their community. And I have cared for so many children who have been shot.
Yeah.
And when you see that every day, you can't help but try to figure out what the problem there is.
Yeah.
How are we failing our kids so deeply? And I began to ask myself that question, started to look upstream, and understood that our lawmakers in Columbia, South Carolina, and our senators and representatives in Washington, D.C. are failing our kids. The system is failing our kids long before they ever walk into the doors of a pediatrician's office or a children's hospital.
Yeah.
So that was my reason to get off the sidelines. But as you said, as a mom, that's my true motivation.
Yep.
Everything changed for me when I became a mom.
Everything.
I shed all my insecurities about willingness to speak up and be bold because I'm doing it for them. I come home and I look at their beautiful faces every day, and I'm doing it for them.
Have you ever asked your kids about their interpretation of what you do?
I have. Actually, this morning, my kids were like, "Where are you going?" And I said, I'm going to Columbia, and I'm actually going to talk to Jaime Harrison. And I think it was my oldest who said, "That guy whose name was on that sign in our yard a few years ago." Yes, he's very famous, and I'm a very important person. I'm going to talk to him. But, it's so funny what they perceive. But Mike, I'm sure your kids saw you out on the, out on the trail giving a stump speech. So my kids have seen me in action, but I don't think they really understand, especially when I'm at home editing all those videos I've posted on Instagram. They don't quite understand what that's all about or why it's funny, but they'll come along.
Well, and I just think that perspective is so important in the U.S. Senate, and particularly in a state like South Carolina, where we have so many beautiful kids, but they are suffering. I mean, there are some kids who, as you mentioned, don't have enough to eat. There's some kids who aren't getting all of the medical care that they need. They're not going to the dentist. They're not getting their shots in terms of, and as a result, they're suffering. And that suffering doesn't stop in their childhood. It continues and is amplified in their adulthood. And it's almost like you need somebody, and you want at least one of your senators to have stood up at 3 o'clock in the morning when you have a kid with a 102 degree fever, and to understand what that means, right?
That's right.
Or when you look at the baby formula and you see that some companies have put certain chemicals in in that baby formula, and you want somebody to be able to hold those people accountable in terms of the regulators and all those folks. And right now, we got some folks who can perform. Lindsey Graham's a great performer. I mean, you remember those Kavanaugh hearings? My God, if you blah, 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 blah. I thought his head was going to explode, right? But it was all performance.
Right.
I was like, the Oscar for the worst senatorial performance goes to Lindsey Graham. But you want somebody who is not about performing, but standing up, like speaking truth to power. And that's why I think your candidacy is so unique. It is so good, and I think it's going to be so refreshing, and hopefully we'll tap into and amplify that hope that we sparked 6 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm so invested in the future of this state and this country because I'm a mom and because I'm a pediatrician, and you can't replicate that. I mean, you don't have to be a parent to be a good person who cares, but that fire inside of me comes from the fact that I'm doing this for my 3 children and the 73 million children in this country.
Well, one other thing I wanted to talk to you about, and this is something that my wife and I talk a lot about. My wife is, she's a law professor, but she is really an expert on food, the FDA, the Food and Drug Law Administration, which is a part of the Health and Human Services, which is led by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Mr. Brainworms himself. And he has been talking a lot about vaccines. And what we've seen is increase of measles.
Yes.
And young children dying in Texas.
Yes.
And no pushback from Lindsey Graham. Lindsey
Yep.
voted for RFK.
Yep.
Tim Scott voted for RFK. Probably didn't even ask any questions. They just were going to rubber stamp.
Exactly.
But you are a pediatrician. You are seeing these kids. Please talk about what you are seeing happening at HHS under RFK's leadership and what you would do as a United States Senator addressing.
Please give me that job right now.
Yes.
It's terrifying. And it honestly is one of the reasons I started seriously considering running in this race, because we are witnessing a coordinated attack on our nation's healthcare system and our nation's public health infrastructure by nothing more than conspiracy theorists and grifters, all enabled by Lindsey Graham. As you said, he rubber stamped this. And we are seeing an unprecedented threat of a cut to our nation's Medicaid program, a full gut over, $700 billion over the course of several years. And I think it's important for people to understand. I heard Representative Clyburn say this last night. People think Medicaid is just for those living in poverty. It is, but it's also for your grandma in the nursing home. It's for the women delivering in maternity hospitals all across this state. And it is the largest insurer of children, both in South Carolina and across the country. So gutting our nation's Medicaid program will devastate the healthcare system in this country on day one.
And particularly in a state where there is not an OBGYN in every county.
Exactly.
Right? There are rural hospitals that are closing. And so anything that is negative about healthcare just pulls South Carolina.
Feel it worse. Yep. Yes. And our maternal mortality rate is already through the roof.
Already through the roof.
And then we're, threats of cuts to the Medicare program, slashing NIH funding. We're no longer going to be the leading country for medical research.
How much did MUSC lose in terms of?
I don't know the number, but it's
I think
devastating.
It's like $30 million or something like that. It was a huge number that they lost in terms of research dollars.
Yes, our public health systems will not survive simultaneous cuts to NIH funding and Medicaid. That devastates their bottom line. And then, as you mentioned, the measles outbreak in Texas, RFK Jr. has a long history of making a lot of money off of sowing doubt in the safety and efficacy of our routine childhood immunizations. And pediatricians like me have been fired up about RFK Jr. long before he ever got appointed to the HHS secretary. And he is doing untold damage to parents' ability to trust in their pediatricians. The vaccine hesitancy we are seeing is challenging. It's really hard to talk to parent after parent after parent and to try to rebuild the trust that RFK Jr. has devastated. And by the Trump administration and Lindsey Graham at his side, elevating him to this position of the Secretary of HHS, it has just done untold damage already, regardless of any policies that they actually implement, untold damage to the public's trust in their medical doctors. And kids are dying, have died.
Yeah.
Old people,
and
everyone.
Getting very
yes,
sick.
It's horrifying as a pediatrician, and I am so fired up about this. And I do believe back to how we can win. I think if Democrats ran solely on the issue of healthcare, especially in this environment, we could start delivering some election victories.
Well, I think that's extremely important. I want to go back to the Honorable Nancy Mace. Lord.
I hope everyone heard those air quotes you
Oh,
just used.
the Honorable. Those big air quotes, folks. The Honorable Nancy Mace. You ran against her for Congress. They super gerrymandered the district. It was a very different district than the one that Joe Cunningham had run in and won. They made it much more friendly, Republican friendly. But tell us a little bit about running against her, and I want you to also respond to the attack that she has already. I mean, I'm like, why don't my grandma used to say, sweep in front of your front door before you sweep in front of somebody else's. Like, she's apparently running for governor or something, but she's not qualified to be dog catcher. But nonetheless, tell us a little bit about your run against her, and what did you learn from that?
Well, I'm proud to acknowledge that I clearly live rent-free in Nancy Mace's head. She sometimes will tell me to move on, or folks will tell me to move on from Nancy, but I'm like, ma'am, you're a congresswoman. I was your opponent several cycles ago. I think it's time for you to move on. It was an incredibly interesting experience to run against a woman like that, who has continued to spiral since that. I mean, she's much worse now than she was before.
Yeah, she needs help.
She needs help. And honestly, like as a human being,
as a human being,
it's sad
she does.
to watch. Certainly South Carolina deserves better, and we certainly deserve a better governor than Nancy Mace. But, it is funny that she chimed in on the day of my campaign launch. I'm not running against her. I'm not sure why she feels like she needs to have an opinion, but she probably just wanted a little bit of the shine I got.
That's exactly right.
But yeah, she said something predictable and unhinged about, my position on gender affirming care.
Yeah.
And as a pediatrician, it's my job to treat every child that comes in the door. And also,
where they are, right?
Exactly.
Not where you want them to be, but where they are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I also know as a human being, a mother and a pediatrician, that it's not okay to bully children.
Yes. Yeah.
Clearly, Nancy and I are not on the same page about that. So she has taken this issue, which is such a ridiculous culture war wedge issue, which affects a tiny fraction of the children and people in this country and in this state, and boil it down to this obscene talking point about cutting off children's genitals. And I mean, I just can't even believe this is real life. But what I would say to Nancy, and what I'll say to Lindsey when he brings this up, as
because
he surely will, is that there are very few professions where it is necessary to occasionally talk about children's genitals, to be frank. And a pediatrician is one of those jobs. Sometimes in the work of my day, that is something I discuss. I am quite certain that is not something that a U.S. representative or a U.S. senator should be discussing. So my question back to Nancy is, Nancy, why is it that you are thinking about and talking about children's genitals?
Well, you preached a whole sermon there. Well, I also want to talk about, of course, you're in South Carolina. We are a state in which we have very few women in elected office. I think I'm told that we're like 49th in terms of, and that's a sad testament to where we are and who we are. I mean, just in the state Senate last cycle, I think we lost the 4 women who were South Carolina senators that lost their reelection bid. Now, we did have a woman governor, Nikki Haley, but how we have 2 women now in our congressional delegation. How do we change that for the U.S. Senate? What is your game plan in a state where it seems like women can't break through that glass ceiling, or very few can? What's your game plan so that you break through?
I mean, it's interesting when you lay it out like that, because we know that just barely over 50% of South Carolinians are women. And so we certainly should have more equal representation.
Exactly.
But there are a lot of systemic barriers in place that make it difficult, even in the most, welcoming environments that make it difficult for women to run for office. That's why I'm grateful for organizations like Emerge America that trains Democratic women to run for office. I'm an Emerge alum, so proud to be an Emerge alum.
Emerge does such an amazing job.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then, on day one of our campaign, I got an endorsement of a national organization, Vote Mama. Their whole goal is to elect more pro-choice Democratic moms to office at all levels. And these organizations are necessary because the system wasn't built for women like me. The system creates barriers to women like me. I have 3 small children at home, 3 school-aged children, and it's expensive to run for office. I have to set aside my job. And when you set aside your job, you set aside your paycheck, it turns out. So
I understand that.
So and then, I launched my campaign for Senate, and about 2.5 hours later, I was picking up my youngest daughter in the school pickup line, her last day of school. And, I'm juggling all of these things, making sure they have something to eat at dinner. And there's a lot of things that male candidates don't have to face.
Yeah.
And when I was on the campaign trail before, I would get questions about, who's with your kids right now? And what do your kids think about you running? And I know that people judge me for the choices I make to be away from the house, to go to campaign events, to set some of my duties as a mom aside to run for office. And I just think that is so deeply unfair because male candidates don't get that same judgment.
That's exactly right.
And even though I'm so proud of the work I'm doing, I know that I internalize some of that judgment, and it makes me question, am I doing the right thing by my children? But at the end of the day, I know that they are watching what I'm doing. And I have 2 daughters, and they see me being bold and standing up for what I believe in. And I know that that matters. And I just have to keep telling myself that that matters. But we have so much work to do to get the female representation that South Carolina needs and deserves.
It's really, really important. And I can tell you, the children are definitely watching. They are definitely watching. I often say, if kids could have voted in 2020 when I ran, I would be the U.S. Senator from South Carolina. Kids are definitely watching. They're looking at what adults are doing right now, and it has an impact on them. I remember, my first political memory was watching Jesse Jackson at the 1988 convention. I was 12 years old, right? And that planted a seed in me about getting involved and doing stuff and about the future. And I think, you as a pediatrician who have such a unique way with kids anyway, I think a lot of kids will be watching, and a lot of and as we know, kids have a power on their parents and their grandparents like nothing else.
That's right.
And influence. And I think, your campaign and that spirit and that connection with children, I think that's going to be a game changer and really help you give you that edge.
I hope so. I mean, as you're saying that, I'm thinking kids need to see someone fighting for their future.
That's
there's
exactly
so
right.
much doomsday in the news, whether it's climate change, gun violence, struggling public school systems, our healthcare system under attack. And, our children are so much smarter than we think they are. They are little sponges.
Yeah.
And they hear this and they see this and they sort of understand the moment we're in as a country. And they do need to see someone fighting for them because they deserve to have a sense of hope and optimism about the future.
Well, and you said a word, and you said fighting for them. Right now, a lot of Democrats are critical of the party right now because they feel as though leaders in the party are not fighting for them. And I think that's a really, really important thing. A lot of people tell me, I want Democrats to fight for me as hard for me as Donald Trump is fighting as hard against me, right? How do you plan to fight against Lindsey Graham and some of the extremism that we now see in politics?
I think that's an interesting point because, if you really drill in and if you're as dialed in as you and I both are, you can see Democrats all across the country fighting for their constituents.
Yes.
We are on the right side of every policy issue. We are delivering results when we can based on the, majorities in Congress and in state houses. But I think what we need to work on, frankly, is our ability to communicate that effectively. And I'm hopeful just by sitting here that that's what you're trying to do because people don't understand, the Republicans are so good at boiling things down. And, it's obviously fear-based
It's all fear.
communication.
It's emotional.
Yes. And
Yeah.
we're not going to do that. But we have to find a way to communicate what we're fighting for, how we're fighting for it. And then when we succeed, make sure we shout from the rooftops what we've delivered. Perfect examples are, lowering the out-of-pocket costs for insulin or prescription drugs. I mean, that directly impacts so many voters in South Carolina. It is such a tangible, clear thing for folks to understand because they go to the pharmacy, they pull out their credit card, they understand how expensive prescriptions are. And we just have to, I say this a lot, we have to be persistent to the point of wondering if we are obnoxious and talk about our wins every single day, every moment we can. I do think that, the Democratic Party as a whole, very similar to physicians and academic physicians specifically, that we love our data, we love to bring our charts and talk about all the numbers. Yes. And that does not cut through. No. And I think we've learned that lesson the hard way. And we've got to meet people where they are, and we've got to learn to talk like regular people to regular people.
As my grandfather said, speak it plain.
Right.
Like you got to use plain English
yes.
to communicate with folks, because all these fancy words and theories and all that, in the end of the day, how do I put food on the table?
Right.
How do I keep my kids in school? What did I do to make sure that their lives are better than mine? Right?
That's right.
I do want to talk a little more about the race. You saw my race against Lindsey Graham. And I can definitely go into some analysis and give you some things that I thought we did well and what I didn't.
Yeah.
I wish we could have done better on. What are some of the lessons that you learned from just looking at that? And if there's a question that you have for me, right, about going up against Lindsey, who's going to be a formidable opponent. I mean, he's a smart guy. He is a political weather vane, right?
Yeah.
He will stick his finger in the wind and see where the winds are blowing, and he will be whatever. He's a political chameleon. He will be whatever he needs to be in order to win. So what are some lessons that you probably learned, or things that you thought that were good? And is there something that you would like to ask me about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, one of the things I learned from watching you is just the value of holding these people accountable. Yeah. If you hadn't run that race and raised all that money and been all over TV and the radio and in our mailboxes, people wouldn't have realized how badly Lindsey Graham was failing us. And yeah, it didn't turn into an electoral victory, but you communicated effectively all of his weaknesses. And I think he's grown even more vulnerable since then.
I agree.
I think, I'm probably the number one person who wants me to win. And I think you're probably the number two person who wants me to win. And so I think I do have a lot to learn from your experience. But one of the lessons I learned was just the importance of communicating, because voters need to see that someone's out there fighting for them. And that it's not just, Lindsey Graham is not just going to get a free pass.
That's exactly right.
And that's one of the reasons I decided to do this. It's a huge uphill battle, but I know that he doesn't deserve just a free pass back to Washington, D.C.
That's so good to hear. And one of the things, listen, you're going to get folks in a lot of the chattering class online. Well, if Jaime Harrison did this and didn't win, and how in the hell are you going to win and this and that? Well, I like to remind people, yes, I raised $132 million, but Lindsey raised almost $100 million. And on top of that, when you look at the amount of money that Mitch McConnell put in the last minute, Lindsey raised on par and surpassed Lindsey, his super PAC, Mitch McConnell, more than I did. This is an incumbent U.S. senator.
Yeah.
And he was scared. He was really scared that he was going to lose this race. And I think, but for some last minute things, Ruth Bader Ginsburg passing away, which took a lot of momentum off of us, because then he chaired this Senate confirmation hearing, and he went from being on the defensive to the offensive. And I think it's gotten even worse. I think, conservatives, MAGA conservatives in the state don't like him, and they really don't like him even more now. I think he used to get a lot of support from independents. I think they're souring on him because he's rubber stamping what's going on right now. These tariffs are going to be devastating to South Carolina. The attacks on Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security are devastating in the state with so many retirements. I really think that the stars are, and Donald Trump is not on the ballot.
Right.
And Donald Trump saved Lindsey Graham's ass in 2020. He really did. But Donald's not there to bail him out this
That's
time.
right.
And so I think all of those factors about him, but you being the amazing candidate that you are, I really do believe that the stars are aligning. And I'm telling folks, you need to invest in this race. Go, what's your website so folks know it?
Thank you. Spoken like a former
Yes.
candidate. DrAnnieAndrews.com. Folks can go there to sign up, to volunteer, to donate. You're right. We need people to invest in this race. We need people to believe that we can win. So what would you say to someone who's like, I mean, you can't win. Jaime couldn't win. You can't win. Yeah. Why is 2026 going to be different than 2020?
Well, for me, I'm putting my sort of political hat on. This year reminds me a lot of 2006. So I was the executive director of the House Dem Caucus in 2006. We were coming off of a major disappointing election in 2004. Inez Tenenbaum had lost the U.S. Senate here in South Carolina when she ran against Jim DeMint, who was just awful. We didn't win as Democrats. We didn't win one U.S. Senate race in the country, but Barack Obama. Right. He was the one in Illinois that we had won. George W. Bush cleaned our clock against John Kerry. We had lost more ground in the House. But 2006, things started changing. One, Republicans were overreaching. And we see that right now. They overreach with this big, horrible bill. We saw unity in the Democratic Party. We saw an investment in the Democratic Party infrastructure that we hadn't seen in a long time. Howard Dean's 50-state strategy launched then. Well, guess what? Based on what I did and what Ken Martin is now doing as DNC chair, South Carolina's going to be getting $22,500 a month from the DNC. When I was the state party chair, we got $2,500 a month. So a $20,000 difference. That means then we're going to put more organizers on the ground to be able to help you and other candidates running and to communicate with folks. And so all of these things, the similarities between 06 are so, I mean, I almost get goosebumps when I see it. And that means then in races that people would normally not find competitive, they become much more competitive. And that means Republicans are going to have to make choices about where they put their money. That means that Mitch McConnell's not going to be able, or now Thune is not going to be able to drop $30 million in October in order to save Lindsey Graham's ass, right?
That's right.
And that is why I believe, again, with the campaigns that I know that you run, that ad that you dropped was hot.
Thank you.
Folks, if you have not seen Annie Andrews' ad, you got to watch it because it is good.
Thank you.
It is really good. And I can tell from the start that you are going to focus on, as I tell all candidates, heartbeat. Everything that you do has to have heartbeat. And it has to touch people where they are and make people feel and relate to who you are. And I know that you can do that as a candidate. I've already seen you do that. And that first ad hits it right out of the park.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's interesting you talk about the 50-state strategy, because here in South Carolina, when you're talking to folks across the country, they're like, well, we see things happening in North Carolina. We see Dems winning statewide races in North Carolina. We've seen it happen in Georgia. Why are folks overlooking South Carolina? Are we just, committed to being a deep red state, as they say all the time? So what is your take on why people should continue to believe in South Carolina?
Because we got people fighting here in South Carolina, and South Carolina matters. We've shown it on a presidential level.
That's right.
Right? When you look at who our presidential nominee, South Carolina has gotten it right almost every single time. Some of the other states, Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, all good states, great people, but they haven't always gotten it right. South Carolina, we get it right every time. And so this is a really important state in so many ways. When we think of the history of this nation, South Carolina plays not sometimes the best role, but it plays an important role in terms of defining who we are and how we have developed. And I think we will continue to do that. And we've had outside influence on the nation. And I think having you in the U.S. Senate representing us will continue that fine tradition of moving us forward. So, Annie, you asked me, how do I think a Democrat wins in South Carolina? My question back to you, how do you think a Democrat wins in South Carolina?
I love that we're having this conversation as two former candidates who ran for office in South Carolina and did not win. I made a joke while we were filming the launch video that the title of my memoir is going to be Raising Hell and Losing Elections. But as a Democrat in South Carolina, you have to have a bit of levity about what we're up against. But I believe it's possible.
Yes.
I would not be here if I didn't think it was possible.
I agree.
I believe the recipe to winning as a Democrat in South Carolina is being an authentic candidate and being willing to put in the work to, number one, raise the money, and number two, hit the ground and be in every corner of the state. Sit down and listen to people and understand their concerns and deliver results and deliver plans for results and give folks a sense of hope.
Yeah.
Give them a reason to get out and vote.
I think that is so key. And, the one hard part for us, and this is my big regret, even though we had no control over, we had plans in my race to run the largest field operation in the history of South Carolina Democrats. That March, remember, COVID, everything shut down that March. But we had plans. I had just authorized hiring a field organizer in all 46 counties. Wow. And that had never, I've been doing South Carolina Democratic politics for a long time. We've never had an organizer in every county. And then we had to go all virtual.
Yep.
And in a state in which, 30, 40% of the state doesn't have any Wi-Fi, right? It's kind of hard to go all virtual in the campaign.
Right.
And when your people are used to knocking on doors and all those type of things. And so it was really, really hard, and the biggest regret. And I remember right after my race, after we lost, and the Ossoff and Warnock went to runoffs, because the DSCC had told us all of the Senate campaigns across the country, not to do field operations. Because, remember, at that time, there was no COVID vaccine.
Right.
And so because of that unknown, we didn't do it. But I told the folks in Georgia, talk to some doctors and figure out ways that you can still knock on doors that are safe, that protect your folks, because that's really, really important. Right. And they actually shifted and changed. And I believe to this day, the reason why Ossoff and Warnock won is because they shifted their strategy and they communicated with people on the doors and talked to people and connected. And that ground game is key. It's not just about TV ads, it's not just about mail, it's about boots on the ground, knocking on doors and connecting with voters.
And so we have an opportunity to redo it, right?
Yes.
We have a second chance.
We got a second chance. There's a lot of talk about identity politics. What's your plan just to make everybody, regardless if you're Black, white, Latino, if you're a man or woman, regardless of your religion or sexual orientation or gender identity, how do you make them feel a part of your campaign?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a critically important question. It goes back to my whole reason to getting into politics, which as a doctor, as a pediatrician, it's never been about my patient's identity. It's never been about red or blue. It's about what's right for the child in front of me. I, as a doctor who works in a hospital, often my patients, I'm just meeting for the first time the day I'm caring for their sick or injured child on probably the parent's scariest day of their lives because their child is admitted to the children's hospital. And it's my job as a doctor to walk into that room, to develop rapport with the child, whether they're a newborn baby all the way up to an 18-year-old teenager, rapport with the child, rapport with the parents, somehow build a sense of trust in a interaction that lasts just several minutes, while also, making a clinical diagnosis. I usually have medical students and residents with me, so I'm trying to model how to be a good doctor to them, communicate these complex medical things in my brain effectively and clearly in a way that the parents can understand. And that is an incredibly complex social interaction that I've done every day for 2 decades, essentially. And it's the same exact thing on the campaign trail, is you just meet people where they are, no matter who they are. Meet them where they are and listen to them and make them feel heard, and then come up with solutions together with them. And, we see, I think, so many, career politicians, over-consulted politicians who forget how to, or never knew how to talk to regular people. It's my job as a doctor to do that, to stay connected to the community. I would be a terrible doctor if I didn't know how to communicate to people, no matter what their background is, no matter what their politics are. And so I think, I talk to doctors a lot about why they should run for office. And I think we underestimate how beautifully that skill set of being a good doctor translates to being a good candidate out on the campaign trail, meeting people where they are and just listening.
I think that is so important. And that is something that I would emphasize for you as a candidate now. And reflecting on my time as both a party chair, but also as a candidate, do not allow these political consultants and all the folks that you have to hire move you off of that spot.
That's right.
There were times in my campaign in which there are things that I wanted to stand up for, the things that I wanted to talk about, but your advisor said, "Oh, I don't know if you should do this. You got to remember you're in South Carolina." But I knew in my heart of heart it was the right thing to do. And there are moments in which I just did what I wanted to do, and there are moments in which I listened to them. But my advice to you is that you run your campaign. This is not the campaign for a political consultant. This is not a campaign for a pollster. This is your campaign running to connect with the people of South Carolina. And so always trust your gut. Don't second judge that. None of these folks, even though they're consultants and they've worked on campaigns, none of them run for the U.S. Senate. You are running for the U.S. Senate, and you know what's right for who you are and what your values are, but also for the people that you want to represent. And so that is one of the pieces of advice I would give you, because there are times I'm reflecting on the Senate race, I'm reflecting on my time as chair, and there are things which were like, I wish I hadn't listened to this person. I wish I would have done what my gut told me. Because you trust your gut. The reason why you're where you are now is because of your gut instincts, right?
That's exactly right.
And many times these consultants push you to not trust your judgment and your gut. But my advice, trust your gut.
I think that's the most important thing for other candidates or future candidates who might be listening.
Yeah.
Because I had the luxury of learning that lesson the first time because of the way they gerrymandered the district. My consultants kind of just let me do my thing in the second half, and my campaign staff did the same. And I've surrounded myself with the same people who will let me be authentically me. Because if anyone follows me on Instagram, they will know.
Is amazing.
Annie Andrews, MD on Instagram. I look back at sort of the relatively unhinged videos I've been posting over the past year or so that have garnered me so much attention and gotten me so much, so many more eyes on the things I care about, because I've just trusted my gut. Like, I think this is funny. I think it's a great way to communicate how terrible Katie Britt's response to the State of the Union was.
That was funny.
Thank you.
That was really funny.
And that was, by the way, all me, alone in my house at my kitchen table, no script, no consultants. That was all me. But if I had a campaign team at the time, can you imagine what they would have said if I said, "Hey guys, can I post this?"
It sounds like some, I don't know, some academic paper that you're writing.
That's right.
Yeah, it's just, you just have to be real.
And voters are desperate for candidates who sound like real people, who are just authentically themselves.
You can make fun of yourself.
That's right.
If you drop an F-bomb every now and then, which, folks, if you listen to this, you might hear one every now and then. Bleep. Earmuffs for your kids. But yeah, people just want you to be real.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And so that's what I plan to do. And I will have your voice in my ear when people tell me to not be myself.
Well, speaking of being real, one of the things that I want to do on this podcast of every one of my guests is, because there's some people who just annoy the hell out of you, right? Who would you like to give the Sit Your Ass Down award to for this episode?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. There's probably some things I want to say that I'm not going to say because I did just launch a campaign for the Senate. We can circle back to that maybe later. We've already talked about her, so I hate to give her more airtime, but the uniquely horrific, country's most embarrassing by a long shot, Congresswoman Nancy Mace.
Please sit your ass down.
Sit
your ass down. Go somewhere.
That's right. Take a vacation. Maybe we could even contribute to a vacation.
Somebody lock her in a bathroom. She loves bathrooms so much. Lock her in a bathroom, right? Make it a smelly one while you're at it.
Oh my God. It's just, it's funny. I travel the country and talk to audiences, about my run for Congress. And, if they're not from South Carolina or not from near here, they maybe don't know the history of my campaign. And then as soon as I say her name, the looks on their faces, the pity, the horror, I mean, one of the reasons I'm so excited to be running again is so people will move past the fact that I was Nancy Mace's arch nemesis for a year. Whenever she does anything unhinged, so basically 4 times a day, people send me the tweets and the screenshots, and it's like, I've seen it. I'm fully aware of what Nancy is up to. No comments.
It's just sad. It really is sad. And I just lost all respect that when she went to the prayer breakfast.
Oh, boy. Mm-hmm.
And talked about her booty call with her boyfriend.
Yep.
That was just like, okay.
Right.
There's a time and a place, but really there isn't a time and place. Nobody wants to hear that.
Oh, you're a congresswoman, and that's what a few people were like.
Prayer breakfast.
I know.
With preachers and all these other faith leaders, and nobody wants to hear that.
Wearing her cross earrings.
Yes. And these faux Christians around here in South Carolina, that's the thing that gets me.
Same.
They love to preach the gospel, but never live it.
That's exactly
right. They never
right.
live it. And that's, I mean, you look at how they treat children, you look at the least of these in our society. That's what Jesus talked about. Do unto me as, you do unto the least of these. But you look at what these folks do. Yep. And their words, their actions betray their words.
That's right. Our current press secretary, the words that come out of her
Oh
mouth
my God.
while she's wearing that.
Her...
Yep. It's offensive to me, and I'm sure so many other people.
Yeah.
We can do better.
We can do better.
We will. That's right. We're going to do better.
2026, because we're going to get a new U.S. Senator here in the Palmetto State.
That's right. Won't that be fun?
Yeah. Well, folks, I really hope you will follow Dr. Annie Andrews. Annie, why don't you say again your website and where people can find you in social media world?
Yes. DrAnnieAndrews.com. Sign up to volunteer. Donate, please. We cannot do that without investment.
$1, $5, $10.
That's right. Recurring $5 donations are incredible. And then on social media, Annie Andrews, MD on Instagram and Twitter. I'm all over all the places. I'm learning TikTok now, unfortunately, but I'm going to get there.
Well, Dr. Andrews, thank you for sitting down at our table. It was a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to hitting the campaign trail with you.
Thank you. Thank you for your support. Honored to be here.
Yeah, we're going to do it.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
If you enjoyed today's show, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Pixel Plus, YouTube, Spotify, or anywhere you find your podcasts. To be the first to know who will be at our table next, be sure to subscribe to our Substack on atourtablepodcast.com. At Our Table with Jaime Harrison is a production of Vision Blue Media. Our founding executive producers are Jason Hayter and Jaime Harrison. Our producers are Kyle Kelly and Emily Harrell. Our content consultants are Ernie Grigg and Clay Middleton. Our digital communications are led by Celie Riccio. Neil Rossini of FWRV LLP provides production legal. Wade Sellers, Kyle Kelly, Jay Matheson, Jeremy Dickerson, and Adrian Williams are our field production team. Alana Davis is our intern. Title sequence by Tom Hunt. Our theme song, Blonde Gone, is written by Dewey and published by Alibi Music Library. Very special thanks to Dr. Annie Andrews and her team. I'm Jaime Harrison, and I look forward to another conversation at our table.